So I would like to have another applause for Pink Web Applications. Applications. And of course all the other sponsors, Server Grow for the website, Ingewikkeld for the meetup group, and O'Reilly for books. If you want a free book, let us know. You can get a review copy, and that means that you have to write 1 or 2 paragraphs of a review, and you'll get the book for free. We've been a little slow on those things. Some people requested them and didn't have them for a few months, but I promise you, send me an email, I'll get it done. It's printed, yeah, so it'll actually be sent to your house. You can review it, and yeah, you'll have a free book, pretty much. That was it. So Pink Web has been sponsoring PHP Amersfoort for a while now. They're definitely a serial location sponsor, as they're mentioned on the meetup page. So I guess it's worth an applause that they do that every time. Thank you very much. Okay, now the main star of the show. We have Mark Hamstra, and he's going to be unleashing creative freedom upon us with MODX. So take it away.
There we go. Yeah, so hi, I'm Mark Hamstra, and I want to talk about MODX today. First, a quick introduction, because I don't know any of you except Rick, because I've seen him speak. I have my own business called ModMore. I develop extras, add-ons for MODX. We sell those commercially, and we also contribute a lot to open source. I also do a bit of freelance development, and in that role I've worked for the company behind MODX, and I've also become one of the 6 core committers. So I know a thing or two about MODX. These are my 2 dogs, which are all sad alone at home right now. They probably miss me just as much as I miss them. Yeah, so this is what I'll be talking about today. First part, more of an introduction. What is it? For who is it? What can you do with it? How does it sort of work? Secondly, we'll do a demo, just logging in, see what we can do there, how things tie together. And finally, we look at a bit more PHP technical stuff. If I don't speak loud enough, or if you have questions, just let me know. We can just go over those while I'm talking. First, I'd like to know, what do you work with right now? When you're building websites for clients, do you use WordPress? You're at the right place. Maybe people using Drupal. Also a few. Okay. Some of the newer kind of CMSs, October, Bolt, Craft. You use a lot of CMSs. The second. Okay. Okay. Interesting. So my goal today is to give you another alternative, not to persuade you all to start doing everything in MODX. Not everything is a fit for MODX. It may not work with your processes, maybe it will. Every system has their own pros and cons, so same for MODX. So what is MODX? First of all, it's open source. It's written in PHP, otherwise I would be in the wrong room. Primarily uses MySQL as the data store, though you can also use it with some other databases like SQL Server. Most people just use MySQL though. And it's already 10 years old. Yeah. When you look at how you describe the software you use, I wouldn't call it a CMS. A CMS is more like WordPress, Squarespace, the kind of drag and drop-y client builds itself CMS. It's not a framework in the sense of Symfony or Laravel either. So I call it a content management platform. Somewhere in the middle. It gives you as developer the choice, the tools to build something, and then handing it over to the client. So it's like two different processes there. Yeah. Does anybody know this graph? Sorry?
It's normally with evil line.
Evil line?
Okay, no,
Okay. It's quite old as well. It's like 5 years old, but it's. I mean, I've worked a little bit for Drupal, just a little bit. so I can't comment too much on that. But in terms of MODX, it's quite accurate. It starts off a bit higher than WordPress or Joomla in this case, but it stays sort of, how do you call it again? Like straight line. It stays pretty average. So for who is MODX? MODX is definitely for the web professionals, the designers, developers, building a website for their clients. Like I said, clients probably won't be able to build a website with it, which is fine, that's your job. And those people primarily use MODX as a tool, not as a solution. So it's one part of their tool chain for building the website. The official estimate for number of sites running MODX is between 4 and 5 million. With a bit of grain of salt because you can't actually measure it. MODX doesn't output anything that says, hey, this is a MODX website. So it's kind of a guesstimate more than an actual valid number. Some numbers from the community just to give an idea what we're doing. There's about 600 free add-ons available. Compared to the thousands and thousands of WordPress, that doesn't seem like a lot. However, there's a strict separation between the actual logic, so a snippet that reads stuff from the database, and how it's outputted. So when, for example, you need to build a gallery, you have the choice of 3 primary gallery plugins, but you have all control over the front end as the way you need it. So you only need one of those 3 to work with any front-end JavaScript plugin or whatever. So you can actually build quite a lot with just those that are available. Forums, just over 50,000 members, 1 million views of MODX.com per month, across documentation, forums, etc. Twitter is quite active. If you end up playing around with MODX and have a question, Twitter is very active. Just post your question there, MODX hashtag, you'll get a quick answer. And MODX also has its own Slack. Does everybody know what Slack is? Or Slack is like IRC, except prettier and more features. Kinda. So you go to that link and then you fill in your email address, you get an invite, and then you can join the chat there. There's also one for PHP, phpnl.nl, which is quite interesting as well. Yeah, so back to MODX. It has all the features you expect from your CMS, your tool. Rich text editing, Markdown if you prefer, media browsers, extensions, friendly URLs, server-side caching, you name it. That's not where it is unique. This empty page is why it's unique. It's a bit counterintuitive, but it basically does nothing until you say it has to do something. There's no assumptions about how your site should look, what kind of markup should be there. So clean install is just that, it's clean. There's no need to take out generated text, to take out weird stuff you don't want. And you have full control over how you want your page to end up. Did I see a question over there, or was that just, no? Okay. So, how do we start building a website? That uses elements. These are the building blocks that you use to build your front end, basically. Start with the template. I'll just go over them quickly, and then we'll get to the live demo so you can see how it actually works. Template, like the name says, it's a template. You have one per page, and you can use all sorts of MODX tags within there. So, for example, this one with the 2 pluses, that means it's a system setting. So, we want the value of the site name system setting there. This is a resource field, so you want a page-specific value. And that's basically how the parsing engine works, the template engine. Template variables, or TV for short, which explains a fun little old TV. Those are custom fields. If you use WordPress, it's kind of like advanced custom fields to plug in, except it's built in the core. All sorts of different fields are available. Chunks are reusable pieces of HTML or something else. We get to that as well. Basically, just a small part of something you want to use somewhere. That's kind of a generic explanation. For example, if this is your chunk, then you can put it in a template with a simple chunk tag with the $sign, and this part will be injected there. Is that clear, or I see some? I'll show it later, then it makes more sense. But
why is it called a chunk and not an include, or is that technically something different?
There is, of course, a bit of legacy there. MODX came from a different CMS that also called it chunks, so it was called chunks in version 1 and chunks. You could call it include if you want. You can actually change it within the manager, and then it will stick the way. So. Getting ahead of myself. Next up, next element is a snippet, which is finally some PHP. I know you've been waiting for that. It's basically a function, PHP function that you define, which you can then call in your template again. So, yeah. That's the basics of the template language in MODX. There are a bit more complicated stuff you can do, or well, complicated, advanced. For example, if you prefix it with a exclamation sign, it will mean it's uncached. So by default, MODX caches everything on a request. But if you have a certain snippet or some kind of output that depends on the user or a session, then you just add the little exclamation mark and that will be parsed on each request individually. The Tesla that was out back, is that from someone here? No? Oh. Yes? I really like Tesla. Which is why there's Tesla here. Yeah, so plugins are basically anybody familiar with Symfony, with event dispatcher? That's kind of the same idea. An event happens in the core or in a plugin, or in an add-on, sorry. And you can listen to that event. So, hey, that's now happening, and you can do something based on it. One example, you can listen to the onPageNotFound event, which means, hey, there's a request, we don't have a page for it, what do we do next? So then you can redirect to a different page or show certain search results or stuff like that. There's about 120 events in MODX core, so it's quite extendable. Yeah.
Can you extend events with your own?
You can find your own, yeah. Yeah, so all of the things we've discussed so far, you don't have to reinvent them every single time. You can just use packages or add-ons or extras or whatever you want to call them. MODX calls them extras. So just install them and just use the provided code. If you look at what this enables, you can do quite a lot of complicated websites without writing a single line of PHP, which is interesting to say in front of a group of PHP developers. But in terms of not having to reinvent the wheel, not having to come up with everything yourself, worry about security, stuff like that, this is quite convenient. This is just a quick example, we'll see some more in a bit. Next slide, actually. Get resources, you can install it via the package installer, and that gives you a snippet that will get resources, that will list pages within your website. You pass it a template, log list item, which is the name of a chunk, and then those resources will be parsed through that chunk and outputted to your front end. Again, there's a strict separation of the logic and the markup, so I could use the same code to make a sitemap, to make submenus, to make anything that involves showing a list of resources. Yeah, just having to learn one snippet. Now we're going to actually see something. Any questions so far? Nope. this is what MODX looks like when you first log in. Well, not first time because I've already set up some stuff, but this is what MODX looks like. There's a few things. Yeah, so the first thing you see is the dashboard. In this case, I've set up a little Google Analytics widget to immediately see how many visits I get, how it changes. There's a configuration check widget which says, hey, your site is not secured properly, which is fine as it's just local, but you know, it's nice to be reminded on production. Little upgrade widget, who's online, and stuff that's been recently edited. You can configure exactly what shows up here, also depending on user group if you'd like. So for example, if you have a client and they log in, you can show them a little widget that says, hey, if you need help, just call this number or send us an email, or you can embed a video, like, hey, if you forgot how this works, here's how. There's a lot of stuff you can do here, just to make it your own quite easily. On the left here, you can see the resource tree, which I'm glad I'm doing this in English because the Dutch sounds terrible. Documentenboomstructuur. Resource tree sounds a lot better. Basically, this is your sitemap. This is the pages on your website. Can have different levels. There is no limit, just a practical limit, like when is it enough? And most clients, if you have like the standard websites that have an About Us page, contact, etc., clients quite like this idea of, hey, this is what's on my site. It's quite clear. In this case, we also have a separate site. We have a sub-site in here. So this is this could be a translation. This could be a site for another branch or another region. And this is actually a core feature, so that's also quite well done. So let's edit the page. Probably kind of what you expected, a form. First we have some metadata, naming, aliases for friendly URLs, descriptions, publish states. Then we have a content field, which in this case uses Redactor, which is one of my premium extras. Schaamteloze zelfpromotie. But you can also get TinyMCE, CK editor, and I think there's a couple more you can just install or mark down. And then we have our custom defined template variables at the bottom. There's going to be multiple categories. No questions so far?
Looks very clean compared to most CMS.
The CMS you normally use, maybe. I mean, not everybody thinks this is the best layout ever, but it's if you compare it to the version from a few years ago, it's definitely improving by a lot. One thing that I'd like to add, all of these fields might be a bit too much for some websites. Some clients will only need the title, the alias for friendly URLs, and then just the content. And that's actually supported in the core as well. It's called form customization. And that allows me to just go in and say, hey, these are the settings. I don't need those. More settings. Resource main left, so the left column. Okay, I only want the page title. And only need the template alias and some checkboxes. I can save that. And you have a very cleaned up, well, there should be one more field there, but then you have a lot of control over what your editor sees right away from the core. One other thing you can do to make it more for your client, more customized, We just deactivate this. There are a whole bunch of add-ons available that do specific things. So for example, I have one called SEO Pro. There we go. Which is a free add-on, by the way. This is not me promoting my stuff again. And what that does is it gives you more guidance, your clients more guidance about how to fill in their resource. So you can see it now shows, hey, are the keywords included? Is it long enough or too long? And it will also show you a preview of what it will look in Google. Clients tend to like that one. Even if it's not 100% accurate, it's a little help for them. Okay, this is what it means when I fill this in.
Can you make a difference between users, what they see in the interface? What you just did, like unchecking some fields, not visible for everyone. Is it possible to
You can say this.
users different fields?
Not on user level, I think, but on user group level. So someone in the client group could see different things than you in the admin group. Let's get this set. You could set a constraint field, and I think this should also support user group.
At the previous page, there was a column in the table with user groups.
Oh, there, yeah. Then where? Oh, there. It's on a different tab. Yeah, so then you can do it by user group. Yeah. There is also a quite sophisticated access control list feature, which is basically how you define those user groups. And a lot of things can be locked down based on that. So you can take away a certain permission, and that will also that will be updated in the main GUI to not show that feature. But that's too complicated to explain in this talk. It's a lot of one to cover. You have quite a lot of control about how this looks. And if you're comfortable with XJS, which is the framework this uses, then you can just take it apart completely. I've done a bit of that, but that's advanced development stuff. So this is my lovely team that I quickly put together. I'm not a designer, and I don't pretend I'm one either. So don't look at the template. I just want to quickly show how this is put together. So we have our menu here, which also shows the current page. It just highlights that part. I have this submenu here. So if there are resources below that, it automatically shows that. And this is how that template looks. First of all, we have a head chunk, which we can see here. This just contains a little doc type. Again, not my theme. This is not HTML5. This is copy-paste stuff. Well, we define the title based on some tags here. We define meta tags.
Where is
So
this
sheet.
code being saved? The database, or is it a file?
This is actually saved in the database. If you prefer working in IDE, there are several tools you can use for that, so that automatically syncs it between a file and the database. Called Gitify, Element Helper, and SE Helper, I think. It's also built in. If you say is static, then you can define the path to a file that should be used. Doesn't work very well with templates. You have to clear the cache every time you make a change, but it works great for snippets and plugins. What was I? Oh yeah. This is, for example, the way I did it submenu. Wayfinder, just a snippet you install. Give the start ID, at what point does my menu start, and to give the level. In this case I have a tag within a tag, which is perfectly fine in MODX. Can be quite powerful if you do it right. And the ultimate parent snippet just returns the ID of the resource at level 2. So this one, 1, 2. Yeah, this is just a basic title content stuff. Footer, not very impressive. Basically everything I've told you so far made you halfway to being an expert in MODX. There's not a whole lot more to learn if you want to build a website. So, good job. Should have a certificate next time. I mean, this is really the basics. If you want to build a website, the information I've given you so far, have a look at the installer, see what packages are available. I mean, that's all you need. It can get more interesting, of course, especially for developers like us. But for building a standard website, you're all covered. I want to show something which is also a nice plugin. Free again, so not promoting myself. This menu structure works great if you have like this, the simple menu structure, something that matches your front end. If you have a news section or something where a lot of daily content is published, you're going to install this. It's a custom resource called Collections. And it basically gives you this little table view of all resources below it. So there's still actual resources, they still work the same, but they're just shown here instead of in the tree as well. Because once you have 1,000 articles in your tree, it starts becoming impractical. Yeah.
What does that mean? So you have news and then 5 and home 1 and about us 2. What does it mean? 2 and 1.
Oh, that's a page ID.
Page ID.
Yeah. ID 1, 5, 2, 3. Maybe I should have said that before. That was. First time I've had this question, and this is the 4th time I'm giving this talk. So, interesting.
More questions there. More questions.
Yeah, come on. Yeah.
Where's the JavaScript and CSS?
Typically, you would just refer to them in your template. You don't have to build that within MODX. I recommend not doing it within MODX. So in this case, this is a very simple template. I just have the link here, the CSS, simple link tag, and I don't think it even uses any JavaScript.
So you would keep those separated from the template?
Yeah, unless you use the static feature, so that you have your files with the template, then you can keep them all in one place. But the template and chunks, stuff like that, do need to be in the database. So that's the synchronization step. Typically, when I build websites, I build it statically first. So it works as an index.html. And then I copy stuff into MODX, replace the dynamic bits, and then I'm done. And I think for most people, most agencies working with MODX, that's also their process.
Is there a possibility to combine it, or?
If you want to, you can definitely put it in the tree. You can make a style.css resource, have it output the right headers, so it's recognized as CSS as well, and that would work just fine. I could show that. Actually, I do have an example of how you can do that with the sitemap. Because I have my sitemap resource here, which, as you know, is XML. All empty, except for the sitemap template. And instead of HTML, it just has the XML defined here. Again, get resources, what we saw on the slides earlier, to get all the pages. And then the sitemap XML for each individual page. You could do the same thing with CSS. So you could define like your wrapper CSS or like the general stuff you define it in your template. And then, for example, a color setting could be a template variable which you then just refer here, if that makes sense.
It's also possible to combine JavaScript with PHP.
Could you explain the use case you're thinking of a bit more, maybe?
Opening a variable from PHP in JavaScript.
Yeah.
So
Opening a variable.
JavaScript, which means
Yeah.
a variable which is only accessible to PHP, or which
Yeah.
is a server variable, something like that.
In that case, I would use a snippet. And the snippet returns a JavaScript or just a value into a script tag. So in your template, it might look like this. I'm just quickly. I don't think it's needed anymore. Then we just create a snippet which returns a number. I can save this.
But returns nothing else.
I can't write PHP anymore. Uh-oh. Isn't this a function? Oh. There we go. So that's how you do that. Another approach would be to, instead of having it return a value, we just and it doesn't matter where I place this in this case. I would call the MODX rec client HTML block function, and then just put and this function will then write it to just before the closing body tag. There's also another function that writes it to just before the closing header tag. And there's some utility function if you want to register a file, JavaScript or CSS. Yeah.
You can also use plugins like jQuery or
Sure.
just put it in there.
In terms of MODX, you are in control of the front end. So whatever you want to use, go ahead. And MODX manages the backend, gives the client a panel to edit it, gives you a place to put it in. So front end is your domain.
I've got another question. You told us that the templating was saved in a database,
Mm-hmm.
and you got some caching. Is the caching saved on a disk?
By default.
Okay.
If you want to, you can set it up to use memcache. I think there's a plugin for Redis. And there's actually also one to write it to the database, which is an interesting use case. But that makes sense if you have a distributed environment and you need a central cache to serve from. So that's actually configurable as well.
How is security related to filling in code by clients from the control panel? Because if they can execute PHP
Mm-hmm.
and they get their login details get lost, how is that secured?
You would typically not give your client access to the elements.
Okay, so you can limit that to just administrators or...
And I'll get to security in a bit as well. That's an interesting subject with MODX. There was a couple of more things I want to quickly show. I just went randomly through my list, so that's useful. Check. Yeah, so another example of a custom resource. We already saw the list of resources, so with the table instead of a tree. This is one that I've created that has a gallery section added to the bottom, which has nice little drag and drop upload, stuff like that. This one is paid. However, I also have some license codes, free license codes here. And anybody that's interested to try out one of my plugins can pick one up later.
What's the average price might be a little bit hard to say, but what's the average on like extension costs? Is it like enterprise level or is it like
No. This one is €25. Excluding VAT, I have to say, excluding. So that's 20%, 21%. The editor, the redactor editor, this one uses syntax highlighting, is also €25. There are a few other supplies besides my business. They're probably between 25 and €100, depending on the complexity and the kind of plugin. And I have one more show, also for my business, which is €79. But that one's really cool. So.
Well, it is good to see those, good to hear those prices because that makes it a lot easier for a web agency to say, well, this is actually going to be cheaper for you than if you were to build this ourselves. So, those prices are pretty good.
And if things go wrong, then you have someone to shout at. That's also. But free plugins, you don't always have that. So.
I have his phone number, by the way, in case something goes wrong. Let me know.
I'll just get to the really awesome plugin then. Has anybody heard of the concept of modular content? I see one not. No? The idea is that instead of having like a rich text field, you actually work with sections and blocks of content. So I just enabled the plugin, which is called content blocks. Basically, I can now add a section, which has 2 columns. And I can add some rich text. And I can add a image. I can just drag and drop that one there. And maybe I want a video. Well, video needs some more room, so let's add it there.
Does this by any chance output as Bootstrap?
As what?
As Bootstrap?
Only if you want it to.
All right. So it could be responsive by default.
Yeah.
Nice.
So I just added a really simple, just rich text, an image there, and a video there. And I guess I didn't. Oh yeah. Rich text, image, video. This is a really simplified example, and I don't have it set up to use all the features yet. But this is the one for €79 plus VAT. So, what you said about using Bootstrap, that is an option, but you don't have to. In this case, and please don't judge me, I just use inline styles. Just to have an example that shows it like side by side. But you have full control again over the markup and how it is outputted to the browser. You can see this started off with foundation, with large 5 columns classes, except this theme doesn't use foundation, and I wasn't going to put it in just for this, so just something quick to make it show. When you install it, you get the option of installing a couple of base layouts and fields, and there's an option for foundation and for Bootstrap. So if you use one of those, it's just install and you can get started right away. There's also a ton of different field types you can use. This is just a base set, so the ones that are installed by default. I guess it doesn't have the coolest one. No, it doesn't. these are also extendable. So if you have your own idea for something and how that should work, how it should look to the user, you can create a custom input type for that and use that, and it looks like it belongs there. Yeah, that's really quick, simple, sort of unprepared demo.
Can you show us something about online forms? I see a contact page. So how do you, is there a possibility to manage the user input from the website?
Yeah, in this case, it just says send me an email. There are several options for forms. You can write it by hand. You can also use, I think there are 2 or 3 different extras available that help you build it. If you use Formit, which is pretty much a standard one, that will also capture the form data automatically and make it available to the admin, aside from sending emails, redirecting the user somewhere, or stuff like that. It's not quite as flexible as, for example, Symfony forms. But if you wanted to, you could combine the two and put it in here. It's also interesting, is a client of mine recently created a set of layouts and fields for content blocks to create a form visually for the client. So you can have like layouts, and those are field sets, and then fields within there are the actual input types, and that's quite cool. But I don't have that here. I don't think it's fully done yet. Yeah, so you probably get one of those plugins that are available for forms.
Is there an application for using this tool by which you suggest not to use this?
You mean the content blocks or MODX?
The whole MODX solution.
Um,
When shouldn't we use it?
Probably. I mean, yeah, the content block sorts a lot of problems that you previously have. For example, if someone just wants a simple blog, WordPress might be easier because it was built to be a blog CMS, and I don't want to offend anyone using WordPress. Yeah, so if it's just a blog, just use WordPress. If you have really complicated custom integrations you need, maybe Drupal or something else would be better. But I also show how you can extend stuff in MODX. Well, now. Basically anything that's on the web could be MODX. Might not always be the perfect fit, others might have better core or available tools for that. But it's quite flexible. You could also, if you have a web app or a native app that needs XML data, you could put the resources here and just make them output as XML for your app. So the client can manage it within MODX, but it shows up properly in their app or on narrowcasting or all sorts of fun stuff. Good question. Any more questions before I get back to, yeah?
How is the Ceph managed?
Sorry?
The Ceph, the search engine friendly URLs?
Oh,
Search engine friendly URLs.
Yeah,
There's a abbreviation for that?
yeah, it's SEO friendly usually. Basically, every resource has an alias. Every resource has an alias, and when you have for example, I can show this actually. I have some pages under the About page, and they will have the path to that page. So first About, and then the alias of the actual page. Is that what you mean, or do you mean like how is it?
Yeah, well, so it only uses the alias that you give. Is there like a native way to speak that you would have alternative URLs that would direct to the same content, for example, with canonical stuff, or like is there only this one thing that he understands?
Well, technically, you can also go to index.php. ID is, I don't know what that is. If you want alternative URLs or something like 301 redirects from old links or something, there's something called redirector, which does what you think it does. There's also a thing that's called CEO tab, which also puts it on the resource. So on every resource you can define alternative URLs, which will be 301 redirected. You can also create a plugin, which triggers on page not found. That says, hey, we don't know this URL yet, where should it go? You can get it from your own database or anywhere. So there's options. By default, it's just the alias.
Okay, and then it ends on .html by default.
By default, yeah.
Regarding the events, are there also like events that trigger on certain statuses where the process is of getting the page? What I mean by that is, like, do you have an event before the URL is interpreted? Do you have an event after the URL is interpreted? Before rendering, after rendering?
I don't know those specific examples in terms of before, after the link is analyzed. But there are a lot of different events. Like I said, about 120. And there's several within the request cycle. There's on MODX init, which is called really early in the process. And there's on before web page complete or something like that. So there are different stages you can hook into. And you can also change stuff in certain events. So on before web page complete, you could just completely rewrite the resource.
Yeah.
Are there any debugging tools?
Yeah.
Debugging
Sorry?
tools, are they available?
What would you like to debug?
I'm a lousy programmer, so if I do anything wrong in templating, for instance, forget to close a bracket or...
There is a plugin for that, which actually checks if your syntax is accurate. There's also something called ModDevTools, which makes managing the stuff a little bit easier because it shows references to stuff. You can just click through to a chunk, for example. What other things are there to debug? There's an error log. Yeah, that's what I can think of right now. So. More questions?
One thing about the back office, is it also possible to template the actual pages there? So for example, if I see an article, I see the meta text at the top. I know I have customers who will say, yeah, great, I just want to edit the content, the metadata can, I made it at the start and then I'll just edit it again.
I think you're asking two different things, or maybe this is just my next view. You can pre-fill the metadata. I have the source open.
Oh,
I mean, do you mean these or?
No, I meant, for example, if a customer would log in the back office and he would say, I need to change the page, 5 pages. He doesn't want to scroll down every time to the content of the page, the metadata that's on top of it.
That metadata, yeah.
Yeah.
This
So,
one.
Yeah. Can you also change it to be more in tune with your customer, for example, if you say, well, I want that stuff at the bottom instead of on top?
Yeah, switching the order, that's difficult, but you can get rid of these fields and put these fields on top.
All right.
But then you can't place these somewhere else, so you can't like switch the order. One thing you can also do, which I never do because I like it this way, but some people do like it. With this one setting changed, I now have the template variables right at the top in a different tab. Personally, I prefer it at the bottom because you then just scroll through your entire page. You don't have to look at different tabs. Also because you might not give the client access to settings or resource groups, for example. But this is actually the default value. So, that answers your question?
Yep.
Cool. Any more? Otherwise, I'm going back to my slides. I think I'll just get.
Same control on the back end as I have on the front end. Like apart from just changing this, can I just change the entire color scheme? I don't know, just like basically build this template myself.
If you really want to, yes, you can.
Okay.
You can accomplish quite a lot in terms of styling with just adding a simple CSS file. But everything you see could be overwritten with a custom manager theme.
So we'll need core apps.
You will need to know more about the core than just know how to build a website. Yeah. I could quickly. This is the actual core stuff, and I have way too much tab open. Okay, manager templates. This is the full template. So these are Smarty files. Would be nice if it was something like Twig, but it's Smarty. And some CSS files here.
Yeah, you could basically add another folder and select it as the active backend template.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
For the CSS, it's actually built with Sass. So if you just want to change one color, it's quite easy. You just change the one variable and rebuild, which is on the build templates default Sass. So then you can just change those, run the build, and have a completely different look and feel. Yeah.
The CMS was built using Smarty, so why did you reinvent the wheel by building a complete colors template system?
I think that's actually reversed because I think the template engine existed before this manager panel.
Okay, yeah.
And for the manager panel, they decided to use Smarty and XJS for the UI rendering. But fair question. I don't want to ask again, but if there's any questions. If you have questions, let me know. No. Then I'm just going back to my. There are some other things I want to talk about as well. So I like talking about MODX, so I don't really care. So I want to briefly talk about a few aspects of the architecture. We've already seen a couple, but mostly by PHP. You can take this slide with a grain of salt. Secure by design, because nothing is ever really secure. But MODX automatically sanitizes the global GPC variables. So any script tags or weird injection stuff in front end is automatically filtered. The Expedio ORM automatically prevents SQL injections by using prepared statements. So that's another checkmark for your security checklist. And if you look at the CVE entries, you see it's actually been quite successful, these two primary things. Again, grain of salt, MODX isn't as popular as WordPress or Drupal, so there's less targets. People might not be hacking it quite as much. But in 10 years of history, MODX has 28 CVE entries, and WordPress Drupal way over 900. That is a big difference, and it does mean something with a grain of salt. But and this data is 2 months old also, so it's probably more by now. What's interesting is right after I made this slide, there was actually a security vulnerability posted about MODX, so that had to one-up it. It does happen, but it's not quite as common. So Expedio is the ORB or ORM, basically the layer between your code and the database. Also open source. It extends native PHP PDO. And this has the support for MySQL, SQL Server, and others. And this is roughly how it works. Really basic example. In this case, MODX extends XPDO, so when you see MODX, it could also be an XPDO instance. You just call get object name or the type of object you're looking for. So mod chunk is a chunk, and the ID, or in second example, a array of more difficult criteria. This works for every type, so for resources, users, anything works with the same API. It's also easy query builder for when you have more complicated SQL queries you need, more complicated filtering. I haven't included it on the slide, but this also supports joins, having conditions, groups, sorts, you name it. Basically, pretty much any query you need can be written using this query builder. And the advantage of using this is, again, security, among other things. The top one, and again, grain of salt, it's perfectly fine to just insert a global post variable, because XPDO will sanitize it before sending it off to the database. If you do this in different systems, you'd probably have yourself an SQL injection, which isn't fun. One note is that it doesn't sanitize it for the front end. So if you have a search field that needs to show the actual value, you do need to make sure it's encoded properly to make sure there's no extra quotes causing cross-site scripting. That's one caveat. So your custom data in XPDO. These are the steps. You create a package, which is a XML schema by default. You can also skip that step and just have it generated based on a existing database table. I prefer this approach personally. Yeah, so if you do it with the XML approach, you then use a build script to generate the model. And the model is basically a bunch of classes, a bunch of files. You registered before using it, otherwise it doesn't know about it yet. And then you can use any XPDO method, get object, get collection, all the fun stuff. So just quickly going to show an example of how you build it up. You define the package name, the base class, that was too fast, as a general model. Within that model you have objects, which are your database tables. In this case, I made this one for PHP Friesland, so FRL Friesland, yay. You're all welcome in Friesland, by the way. It is a long drive, but okay. So I have two objects, meetups, speakers. Then I define the fields for each, well, key, types, and some optional stuff. One thing that's interesting here is because you define both the database type and the PHP type, XPDO can automatically do certain transitions for you. So if you define a PHP type of array, it will automatically serialize that as you write it to your object, as it writes it to the database. Same can be done with JSON and some other things I don't recall right now. That's quite interesting, convenient developer feature. We can add some indices, and we can add relations, which make it easier to get from one object to another, as I'll show in a little bit. In this case, composite and aggregate relationships. Composite means that if I delete the meetup object, it will delete all related speaker objects. And aggregate just means, hey, this is a connection. They just exist, but don't remove anything if I remove the other. This is the generated model. It's very impressive. Usually there's a bit of PHP doc on top of it as well. And this is how you would interact with it finally. So you started with adding the package, which, by the way, won't be needed in the next version of XPDO, XPDO 3. Code already exists, but it's a backwards compatible break, so that's being deferred to MODX 3. Then you won't have to do the first line. Then you can just use your query builder or your get collection, get object. Interact with them And finally, at the bottom, you see an example of how you can get related objects via Expedio models.
What do you get if the object does not exist?
No, I think. No, yeah. And in the case of get collection, I think it's an empty array. More questions about?
Are these variables available in your templating interface as well? Assign them just like Smarty assign variable to a Smarty template.
Yeah, you could use a snippet to get the object or objects you need. You just set placeholders, which is equivalent of Smarty for the MODX figure. This is just, don't use this in production. Yeah.
Does it handle changes in the object schema?
Does it automatically handle it? No, but it does provide helper methods to do that. Typically,
Like if you change the name to two separate things, last name, first name, and
Mhm.
you want to rename name to last name and then add first name.
yeah, you would use some systems call them migrations. I personally just write a simple index.php file or just any file somewhere in my build script, and that calls MODX auto field, and then rename it and MODX add field first name. So it doesn't do it automatically, but you're given the tools to do that. And that all depends on your project and how you work, what your workflow is. Yeah, but there's options. There's always options. This is another example of a full schema. Here you can also see like the PHP type array stuff. So I have a random data object and I can just pass an array to that and it will get written properly and retrieved as well. This is what you'll see in a lot of projects.
Are you still using using foreign keys? How do you do that?
Sorry?
I see you're using the storage engine MySam
Yeah.
together with foreign keys from memory. That is not a valid combination.
These relationships are actually not added to MySQL. This is handled by Expedio. So it's basically handled on the app layer instead of the database layer. You can also use it with InnoDB, but there's a full text index somewhere in the core that's preventing that from being the default. I think that's how it was at least. I think it may be getting better, but
full text is the only thing in MySam, not in InnoDB.
yeah.
Anyone else should be using InnoDB.
You can probably just define InnoDB and it will work fine, as long as you don't use full text. No more questions? Good. So I already showed this in the manager. Just want to highlight it again. Custom resources, they can be completely overwritten, which includes changing how it is processed for the front end, as well as the UI, which we already saw. Same thing is possible with users. So if you have different authentication logic, you can put it in a custom user class and set your user up to use that one. And that's the end of my talk, interesting. Enjoy creative freedom. These are some links I will also put on Meetup. This is the most important one, of course, my business. Yeah. And please do leave feedback on joining. I'm trying to improve, so thank you. Unless there's any questions. Yeah.
Let's say I want to create a form in the manager. Can I use the CSS and the scripts from the MODX backend as well?
I'm not sure. You want to create a form in the backend?
I want to create a menu item in the manager, and then I want to create a form, but I want to use the MODX styling, for example. How do I do that?
There's a pretty good documentation page about it. You can reuse core controllers. It's sort of MVC, couple different changes. You can use that. The manager does use XJS for the UI, which isn't the easiest to learn. I do have to admit that. But if you master that, then it's easy to just extend that. What I'm personally experimenting with right now is creating HTML first components. So just have the controller generated from views and whatever. And just using CSS to make sure it looks the same.
Okay.
That's not done. I'm still working on it. But I think that would be an interesting alternative to XJS.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool.
It's really quiet. Thank you very much. I believe those are all the questions. Yeah, cool.
I'll be here for a little bit. So.
Cool. Yeah, thank you very much. I heard you had am I saying this right? Mod.more?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Mod.more coupons, I could say.
Yep.
Discounts.
Free license code.
Free license codes. So I believe he has about 10 of them. You could throw them, or you could just go up to Mark and ask for one. I would say it looks pretty interesting, so give it another look. Yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
One remark. I just noticed how the official documentation is rtfm.modx.
Yeah, that's read the free manual. That's what they say at least. Or some places say it's the fantastic manual, but we all know better.
Our definitions differ. Yeah, definitely give him some feedback. Feedback is the most important thing a speaker can get. So that's the link. The slide will be on afterwards. So scan it with your QR code scanner or just type in those numbers. I'm sure he would very much appreciate it.